The moment I stepped into the restaurant, the air shifted. Not in a loud, obvious way, just enough. Enough to feel like the world tilted slightly on its axis, and everyone noticed except the people pretending not to. Laughter dipped. Glasses paused midair. Even the string lights seemed too staged, too bright, like they were part of someone else's show. I hadn't seen most of them in 2 years. No fights, no public blowouts, just distance. I stopped replying to texts that weren't real. Questions skipped phone calls that came with guilt, baked into every syllable. And now here I was at Grandma Ellie's 80th birthday dinner, walking toward a long table packed with familiar faces and colder intentions. They'd left one chair, one. At the end, farthest from the head like they'd planned it. I didn't hesitate. I sat. Grandma was the first to greet me. Her arms were soft and real and long, holding me like she knew. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. I nodded. "Wouldn't miss your lemon cake." I smiled. Then Rachel, my sister. Same perfect hair, same curated smirk. She didn't wave, just looked me up and down like I was a glitch in the algorithm she'd spent years refining. She leaned back in her chair, lips tight, like she already knew how the night would end. Dinner began in stiffness, clinking forks, empty talk. My uncle recited a hunting story. My father pretended to care. My mother complimented the centerpiece like it was someone's GPA. And then came dessert, or it should have. But instead, Rachel cleared her throat, reached into her bag, and pulled out a manila folder, clean, sharp-edged, intentional. "Before we dive into cake," she said lightly, "I thought I'd bring a little something of my own." Her fingers tapped the cover. I looked at it, then back at her. And I knew this wasn't dinner. This was a performance. And someone, probably Rachel, had just cued Act 1. I didn't come for closure. I came for her cake. But someone brought a folder instead. There was no big explosion, no screaming match, no slammed doors or middle-of-the-night escape. I didn't pack my bags with tears streaming down my face or leave a note that said, "I'm done." I just stopped replying. It started with the group chat. One day I muted it. A week later, I archived it. Eventually, I left without a word. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and decided silence was more convenient than confrontation. Growing up, I was always the emotional one. That was the word they clung to, emotional. As if it excused every joke at my expense, every eye roll when I shared something I was proud of. "You're too sensitive. Don't take it so personally. We're just teasing." But teasing implies affection, and what they gave me felt more like target practice. Rachel once told me I had main character syndrome because I cried after Grandma forgot my birthday. I was 15. Dad laughed and said, "Don't worry, Jenna. You'll write a poem about it someday." I did, but I never showed anyone. They didn't yell at me. That would have been easier. Instead, they made me feel like I was always one reaction away from being the problem. So I stopped reacting. Stopped sharing, stopped asking to be understood. When I moved to Seattle, I didn't tell anyone until I was already gone. Rented a 1-bedroom with a cracked window and peeling paint. Worked 3 jobs, ate soup from dented cans, started designing handmade journals late at night when the city outside was quiet enough to think. No one asked why I'd left. No one called to say, "Are you okay?" I guess in their minds I was just off on another whim, chasing some feeling, being dramatic. It was easier to believe that than to admit maybe they had pushed someone too far without realizing until the chair was empty. Even when I posted a photo of my tiny storefront with the caption, "Built with bare hands and borrowed time." The likes came in, but not a single message from them. Not even Rachel, especially not Rachel. They didn't ask why I left because deep down, they already knew. Back at the table, the mood was deceptively light. Polite laughter at stories no one really cared about. Someone passed around photos from a trip to Napa. My aunt mentioned her new Pilates instructor twice. Dessert plates were being cleared, and for a moment I thought maybe the night would end quietly. But Rachel had other plans. She stood slowly, tapping her spoon against her glass with just enough force to make heads turn. Her smile was perfect, camera ready, confident, the kind she wore when she knew something no one else did. I hope everyone's enjoying the evening, she began, her voice silk-wrapped in control. And before we slice into Grandma's legendary lemon cake, she reached into her leather tote, pulled out a manila folder, and held it up like a magician, revealing the final card. I brought something of my own. I didn't blink. The air thinned. My father looked vaguely amused, like he was in on a prank. My mother gave a small, confused laugh. Grandma blinked twice. Rachel kept going. You all know Jenna's been telling some impressive stories lately about her new business, her big success. Handmade this small batch that. And I'm all for girl bossing, she said with a wink. But I thought we owed it to ourselves, especially to Grandma, to make sure it's all real. She grinned wider. So I hired a couple of professionals, private investigators, nothing personal, of course, just a little fact check. My uncle chuckled, shifting forward in his seat, like the evening had finally gotten interesting. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I watched her like you watch someone load a gun backward. Rachel slid the folder across the table, landing it squarely in front of Grandma Ellie. I thought it would be nice for everyone to know the truth, she said, looking straight at me. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. I didn't speak. There was nothing to say yet. Grandma's fingers hovered over the folder, and I wondered if Rachel had ever once considered that truth is a double-edged thing. She wanted to ruin me with paper, but she forgot what was printed on hers. The night I left, I didn't feel brave. I felt numb, like I'd quietly peeled myself away from something sticky and invisible, and I didn't even know how much residue I was still carrying. Seattle didn't welcome me, it tolerated me. The first week, I slept in my car behind a 24-hour laundromat. January cold crept through the windows like a warning. I wrapped myself in a coat I'd stolen back from Rachel years ago, shoved a sweater under my head, and told myself it was just temporary. In the mornings, I'd splash water on my face in gas station bathrooms and rehearse optimism in the mirror. By day 8, I found a part-time job at a diner. By day 11, a second one cleaning offices overnight. By the end of the month, I added a third sorting books at a used bookstore with a heater that wheezed like it had asthma. There was no big vision, just survival. Until one night around 2 a.m., sitting on the tile floor of the drafty studio, I could barely afford, I started sketching a journal cover. Something simple. Linen, hand-stitched. Space for people like me who needed to write things down, because saying them out loud always got twisted. I borrowed a library laptop and taught myself everything: SEO, shipping logistics, handmade binding techniques. I scraped together $300 to buy tools and raw materials. And when I finally listed 5 products on a tiny online shop called Hollow and Thread, I stared at the screen for hours. No traffic, no orders, just silence. 3 days later, someone named Meredith from Pennsylvania placed an order for a sky blue gratitude journal. I read the email confirmation like it was a love letter. Then I cried. Not because it was a windfall, not because it meant I'd made it, but because it was real. Because someone out there believed in something I made with my own hands. No applause, no family texts. Just me in a room with no curtains and a mattress on the floor, whispering thank you to a stranger who had no idea what she'd just saved me from. The night I launched, I cried over a $12 order. Not because it was big, because it was mine. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. The subject line was casual, almost forgettable. You didn't hear this from me. I almost deleted it. Then I saw who it was from: Maya, an old coworker from the bookstore job. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Inside was one sentence: Rachel's asking questions about you, and not the kind people ask with love. There was an attachment, a screenshot of a text thread between Rachel and a guy she used to date. Apparently, he now worked at a boutique PI firm in downtown Portland. She was asking for a full background sweep on me: employment, business history, finances, public records. I read the message 3 times, closed my laptop, boiled water for tea. Because the thing is, when people start digging in the dark, they forget one thing: they don't get to control what surfaces. I didn't panic. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even reply to Maya, though I made a note to thank her one day. Instead, I started posting. quietly, carefully, truthfully. A photo outside the Washington State Business Licensing Office casually tagged. A repost of a podcast episode where I'd been interviewed about microbrand resilience. An Instagram story showing me signing vendor agreements with a caption that said, "Grateful for the right partnerships." Even my LinkedIn, which had been dormant for years, suddenly got a subtle facelift. Nothing flashy, no look at me now tone, just enough breadcrumbs for anyone curious or anyone hired to follow. I didn't fake a thing, didn't need to. My story wasn't flawless, but it was real. Real in a way Rachel's life had never been. Because I built my business from the floor up, literally. Every contract I signed, every tax form I filed, every customer thank you I wrote in longhand. It was all traceable, verifiable, public record. And the best part Rachel didn't realize. She wasn't just hunting for holes in my story, she was giving people permission to look into hers. I didn't have to set a trap. I just had to stay still while she walked into one. She wanted to expose me. I let her, but only because I knew what she'd uncover by mistake. Rachel had always been the success story. The LinkedIn darling, the one with curated captions, polished headshots, and a rotating highlight reel of collaborations that never seemed to include actual details. To the outside world, she was unstoppable. To the family, she was untouchable. But I knew better. 2 years ago, Rachel tried to launch a subscription box business, some kind of luxury wellness thing. She rented a small office space, flooded her socials with mock-ups, and launch teasers talked about investors who believed in the mission. The launch date came and went. Nothing shipped. A few months later, the website disappeared. At dinner, when someone asked how it was going, she said she pivoted to consulting. I didn't press. I never did. I knew better than to corner Rachel because she didn't fight, she deflected. And if that didn't work, she attacked. So I kept quiet, let her build her version of the story. But the cracks were always there. Like the time I spotted the exact same resume bullet points she used on mine, just worded fancier. Or when I learned the nonprofit she claimed to work for had dissolved 5 years ago. Or when I overheard her yelling on the phone to Dad about a clerical error involving credit card statements. She had always lived off the image of control, and Dad funded it quietly, always bailing her out, always framing her as the golden child who just needed one more chance. Me, I was the emotional one, the dramatic one, the one who had to prove every dollar I made. So when she hired investigators to pick my life apart, she assumed they'd stay on script. That they'd stop after confirming my revenue wasn't impressive enough. That they'd highlight inconsistencies. What she forgot is investigators don't care about family roles. They don't care about optics or old favoritism. They follow facts. And facts, unlike stories, don't flinch when you dig too deep. She gave them a flashlight and accidentally handed them the map to her own mess. She hired them to destroy me, but she forgot investigators don't stop at page 1. Grandma Ellie's hands hovered above the folder fingers, trembling slightly, but eyes steady. The room leaned in, not physically, but emotionally. You could feel it. Everyone pretending not to care, but no one looking away. She opened the cover. The first page was simple, a copy of my business license, state-stamped, verified. The next held screenshots of my online store's back-end revenue graphs, shipping logs, customer testimonials. A short note from one of the investigators read, LLC status active. Business operating legally, no signs of misrepresentation or fraud. I didn't move. Grandma flipped to the next page. More documentation, supplier contracts, podcast, features digital press mentions. Rachel's smile was still frozen in place, but her eyes had narrowed just a bit. Then page 4, it was a photo of her, standing in front of a generic office door with a company name that to anyone curious would appear on 0 IRS listings. Under it, a line of text from the investigator, noting the organization she claimed to work for had been legally dissolved in 2018. Page 5 showed screenshots of her resume, annotated with red boxes, no verified degree on file from UCLA. No employment record matched with nonprofit's stated board. Then came the bank statements, transfer logs, multiple. From Dad's consulting firm to an unregistered checking account under Rachel's name. The air didn't just shift, it stopped. Grandma's hand paused on the last page, her lips parted, but no words came. She slid the folder silently toward my father. He stared at it like it might catch fire. My mother's fork clinked against her untouched plate. My uncle cleared his throat suddenly, finding the floral pattern in the tablecloth fascinating. Rachel reached for the folder, voice breaking. Okay, this isn't someone mixed things up. That's not what I... No one mixed anything, I said quietly, still calm, still seated. She looked at me like I'd conjured the entire thing, but I hadn't. I'd just stopped hiding, and the truth did the rest. The folder didn't just expose lies, it rearranged the family. Rachel's voice cracked first. This is absurd, she snapped, trying to laugh but failing. You really think she didn't plan this? She probably fed those investigators. This whole thing is staged. No one responded. She looked at our father, Dad. Say something? He opened his mouth, closed it again. The veins in his neck twitched, but his hand stayed folded in his lap. Rachel turned to my mother. Mom. My mother didn't even look up from her plate. The folder sat between us like a bomb no one wanted to defuse. She's always been manipulative, Rachel pressed on, her voice growing shrill. She plays the victim, that's her thing. She makes everything dramatic, always has. Still no one moved, no one argued. They just stopped. Not because they were taking sides, because the evidence had already spoken and Rachel's voice didn't hold weight against paper and ink. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I'd already told my story in shipping logs and licenses and podcast transcripts. The kind of truth that doesn't shout. It just sits undeniable. Rachel stood desperate now. You're going to let her play you like this. After everything I've done for this family, my uncle reached for his water. No one looked up. Then I felt a hand slide gently over mine. Grandma. She didn't say much, just leaned in soft and steady. I always believed you, she whispered. I just didn't know what it cost you to keep going. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not this time. I only nodded, the weight in my chest finally shifting. Rachel sank back in her chair like a deflated balloon, her eyes darting, searching for someone, anyone to save her. But no one moved. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity, the kind that doesn't arrive with shouting. It arrives with silence, final, heavy and earned. She brought war, I brought silence, and silence won. 3 days after the dinner, my phone buzzed twice. Both missed calls, from her. I didn't answer. An hour later, a text appeared. Can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I want to make things right. It was signed Mom, as if I might have forgotten. As if distance erases names the way it erases blame. I stared at the screen not with rage, but with something quieter, familiar. There was a time when that message would have wrecked me. I would have read it 20 times, drafted responses I never sent, cried in the shower. Because maybe, just maybe, it meant she was finally ready to see me. But that time was gone. The truth had already been read aloud, not in words but in silence. In who stayed quiet when it counted. In who didn't flinch. And what do you say to someone who only believes in your value once it's been notarized? What do you owe to someone who never defended you until proof was printed on someone else's letterhead? I typed slowly. Carefully, one sentence. You never believed me until someone else told you to. Then I hit send. Then I blocked the number, not in anger, not as punishment, just completion. Because not every goodbye needs to be loud. Sometimes it's a line of text sent without expectation. Sometimes it's choosing not to wait for answers you've already outgrown. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. It just felt clean, like setting down a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying your whole life. There was grief in that, sure. Not the sobbing kind, the quiet kind. The one that visits like a memory instead of a breakdown. I sat on the couch for a while, letting the silence settle around me like a blanket I had finally learned to fold, not fight. She had reached out too late, and I had finally reached back for the last time. Closure isn't an apology, it's knowing you don't need one anymore. The rain hit the windows soft and steady, a Pacific Northwest lullaby I'd grown to love. My apartment smells faintly of cedar and bergamot peace, bottled and burning in the corner of my bookshelf. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. I kicked off my shoes by the door toes, aching from a day on my feet, and dropped my keys into the little ceramic dish I'd made in a beginner's pottery class last fall. It wobbled on the bottom uneven like everything else I'd built, but it held, just like me. I shrugged off my coat, poured myself a glass of red wine, and leaned against the kitchen counter as my laptop pinged from the living room. A new order, hand-bound gratitude journal, custom inscription, gift wrapped. I smiled. Not because it was impressive. Not because the customer had tagged me on Instagram or mentioned me in their newsletter. Just because it meant someone somewhere saw value in something I made with my own two hands. And they didn't need a folder to believe it. I walked into the living room where the soft hum of the city buzzed through the cracked window. Lights blinked like distant stars, small steady reminders that not everything bright has to be loud. There were no trophies on my shelves, no press clippings framed in gold, just plants I hadn't killed, books I'd actually read, and journals I'd filled with things I didn't need to prove. This was the life I built. Not curated, not filtered, lived. And the best part, it didn't need to be defended. Rachel had tried to stage a public unmasking, tried to narrate my story as a lie dressed up in hashtags. But truth doesn't need a narrator. It just needs time and space and the willingness to let go of who you were supposed to be so you can live as who you already are. I picked up a pen, opened a fresh journal, and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. This time, I don't need them to read it. She tried to write my story in front of everyone, but I published the truth without saying a word.